New webcam. Yay. You could probably tell the difference. It's a little bit worse quality because that's how it is, but hopefully it's good enough, and hopefully it'll be non-intrusive and won't crash on me in the middle of talking twice. Mega Man 9. How many of you, right now, how many of you who didn't watch the stream remember Mega Man 9 fondly? Now, if I rewound times about 8 or so hours, I would be raising my hand on that. And it's obvious why. There's a lot of attempts to try and go with new gimmicks and try to do new things with the engine, or rather the lack of engine, because they had this whole new emulator-y style engine thing, which they couldn't do back in the NES. And they really tried to push the envelope on that. Most of the stages have at least one gimmick. Some of them only have one gimmick, looking at you, Tornado Man, but at least they've got that, right? I really liked the direction they were going with this, and this continued into the Wily stages too, because I like good, proper, difficult Mega Man. I love Mega Man 5, for example, is one of my favorite examples of that, because there's just so many wonderful little tight, neat, beautiful jumps, and it's always properly escalated and yada, yada, yada. Even this game has decent escalation. Not great. It's not the proper theme layering like we did in Mega Man 8 or Mega Man 5, but it's still enjoyable. And then there's the weapons. We could talk about the weapons. They're decent weapons. They're mostly reskins, if we're just being honest. The shield is kind of weird. So you can put it up, but you can move it while doing it. But you can only shoot it in one direction. So it's like a worse, but slightly better Woodman shield. I'm not even sure what they were thinking about that one. The tornado shot is just straight up the gravity crush. It's just copy-paste. But it's still a good weapon because the same reason the gravity crush was a good weapon. We've got the Hornets, which are nowhere near as good as the Surge Missiles, which is one of the best weapons in Mega Man 8, by the way. But, it's still cool. And they can grab items and pull them back to you, which is pretty neat. I like that. And, there's a couple others. We've got the triple shot, which gives you a little bit of spread fire. It's kind of weirdly aimed. I feel like Blizzard Man's shot was a little bit more useful with the 2 and then the 1s instead of just doing a straight trio. Can't do that with my finger, apparently. Like they do in this one. Stuff like that. We have, the usual stuff that I can't even think of. I'm sorry, I'm mind blanking a little bit here. The Trident is actually kind of neat. It's exactly what Needleman's weapon should have been back in Mega Man 3. It's a piercing shot that goes straight across, stuff like that. The Concrete Man, I like Concrete Man's weapon. It's really cool. So first of all, you lay it down, it gives you a platform for a second. But you can also use it on enemies or to block parts of the terrain. And that's another thing. A large amount of these weapons were used as part of the level design, which is good. It's similar to something they kind of did with Mega Man 8, but to another extent. Slightly worse executed, but more implemented, if that makes any sense. Like, they did more of it, they just didn't do as good a job of polishing it. And that makes sense, given the behind the scenes. I actually don't have that much behind the scenes information on Mega Man 9, because for some reason the only person who's willing to talk about it is Inafune. And we're officially reaching the point where he's becoming less and less reliable of a source of information. So, on the one hand, they're like, hey, let's make a Mega Man game. Okay, that's cool. And you might think this was during the big drought. It actually isn't. That's the really weird feeling. Because the previous Mega Man game to come out before this was just about a year and a half earlier. Mega Man ZX2. In fact, Inti Creates went straight from working on ZX2 to working on this. Now, I can only speculate, but if you've seen the streams and you've seen these ruminations, you probably know that I've talked about the internecine politics thing that was going on at this point in time, and Inafune's kind of descending star, which led to him leaving the company, right? I think that this was one last gasp, an attempt by them, and I do say them, not just Inafune, to try and reclaim some prominence. Say, hey, we still got the touch. You can't just push us out of the office. We should still give financial support to Mega Man, an attempt which apparently failed because they totally pulled the plug on this, and we actually hit the long dark of Mega Man shortly after this, because, we have this, we have Mega Man 10, and then we have the gap between here and 11, and that's our actual gap, and where they pulled the plug on Legends 3 and ZX3, and the Maverick Hunter series was canceled, and the Powered Up series was canceled. And yes, I know there's sales figures that is involved with that as well, but we've talked about that before, so moving on. Are we still here? Sorry, I'm checking my monitor periodically to make sure that I'm still here because of this frickin' webcam. But what I do know is they were like, what we should do? We should make Mega Man 2 again, or 2.5 is what someone in chat kept saying, which is a great way to put that. But they literally went into this with the mentality and the stated interest of making Mega Man 3. And not the existing one, making a sequel to Mega Man 2. And the reason I bring that up is that ties in perfectly with my theory, which is a theory, that this was Inafune and whoever was on his side in the political internal office politics stuff trying to grasp solvency and relevance and try to go ahead and be significant going forward and to keep the Mega Man brand going. Because Mega Man 2 is still, asterisk, the best-selling Mega Man game we've ever had. And I only put that asterisk there because it's actually kind of hard to tell figures on these things because they only track actual shipped units and not digital ones. And we don't have accurate sales figures for like Mega Man 11, which sold extremely well, but we don't know exactly how well and might have actually surpassed Mega Man 2. We're not sure because inconsistent figures. And let's be honest, developers and publishers don't actually have to publish sales figures. So it's very likely that we'll never actually know which one of them is actually the best-selling. But at the very least, what we do know is Mega Man 2 sold very well. We do know that. Thus, of course, we're going to go back to the well. We're going to go back to that one, right? That's how we do that. That's how that works. That was the last time we were successful. Are we going to acknowledge, 20 years of game development? No! We're just going to make Mega Man 2 again. But worse. And that's Mega Man 9. Now, if you watch the stream, I apologize because I actually got legitimately angry at the game. And that is damned rare. Have you ever seen me kind of rant or vent or say, that's not me being actually angry. That's me. I'm admittedly playing it a little bit up because I want to be entertaining, and that is one of the goals, is to be entertaining. So if I'm irritated by something, I can just be irritable. You've ever been around someone who's just irritated or frustrated? It's kind of awkward and uncomfortable, right? So I try to turn that into something kind of joking and kind of cartoony to make it less awkward and less uncomfortable for you all who's watching, right? But the other side of that is that's venting. That's the steam being released. I'm not at the point of actual anger. This is making sure I don't get to that point, right? So that's not me being upset at a game. This is me being upset at a game. Because when I actually get legitimately upset at a game, I can't play around with it. I can't just be joking or dancing or having fun or whatever the heck. I can't actually try to stylize it. All I can do is try to hide it. Any of my long-term viewers, especially on the stream, probably knows when I get actually upset because I tend to get quiet. Now you're probably thinking, all right, Laura, what did this game do to you? Well, the problem is this game it does have good stuff, right? It does. It has one of the better plots in the entire Mega Man franchise, in my opinion. The idea of robots who have legally mandated by the government expiration dates, at which point they get shuffled off and turned into scrap and then recycled into new robots. That's actually horrifying on every level. And yet it makes so much sense, and there's so many reasons we could be doing that. Maybe they're trying to prevent robot masters from being a problem like they have been every other time Wily has tried to take over the world. Maybe they're trying to ensure that there's no robot uprising in general by preventing a Geth situation or a droid situation in Mass Effect or Star Wars. Maybe it's just the fact that they aren't considered people, like they don't have legal rights. They are considered property, and therefore it is part of the cycle of trying to make sure that there's always newer generation robots, that they always get rid of the older generation robots, and so forth and so on. There's so much that can be gleaned from this. And they do a good job with this. You'll notice that Rock actually sounds weirded out, like why would they be upset just because they were about to be scrapped? Because it's so normal. And the robots themselves, when Dr. Wily approaches them, because Dr. Wily's behind it, by the way, when Dr. Wily approaches them, his whole shtick is, doesn't this make you angry? And the robots don't say that makes them angry or whatever. Instead, they say, well, if you reprogram us, we'll have more use, right? Because it's so built into them that the only reason they could keep going, the only reason they could keep functioning and bypass their expiration date is if they have a function, is if they are contributing something. Which, by the way, is part of the ending as well. Dr. Light repurposes them and finds new reasons for them to exist and have new function, and that allows them to bypass their expiration date for now. Think about all that. This is fascinating stuff. And it's good because all of the wonderful things that the previous Mega Man games are doing from about 4 onwards are completely absent. One of the most common pluses I give to Mega Man games is visual storytelling. There's so much that the background does to tell the story of the game, which is not completely absent here, but noticeably lacking. Especially in comparison to Mega Man 8, the game we just did, which had this in spades. Despite having the nonsense plot and the stupid cutscenes and the wonderful voice acting, Mega Man 8 still had more story in spades than this game does, even though this game has a superior plot to it. And so the story kind of drags back a little bit because it's not particularly well told. And, well, that just kind of summarizes the game in a nutshell, doesn't it? Gameplay-wise, I already talked about the weapons. I already talked about the gimmicks. They try to vary up the gimmicks, but it feels like they looked at Mega Man 2 and didn't understand what made it good, and so they made Mega Man 1.5. Yes, I'm borrowing that from chat. I forget who said it, but whoever it is, you get credit for that. I didn't come up with that. This is Mega Man 1.5. This is worse than 2, in my opinion, but also by my rating. Because 2 was tightly designed despite its simplicity. We talked about this when we were playing 2. 2 had like a 20-second cutscene leading into the intro, and yet they do a lot in that very small amount of time to try and hype you up for the game, get you the premise, and get you in the mode for playing through it. They had to use what little they had very carefully and precisely. In Mega Man 9, they suddenly didn't have the limitations of the NES, so they could do whatever they wanted, right? They wanted to make an NES game, but with modern technology. And so we have all kinds of stuff that would make this literally not work on an NES cartridge, right? Even the music. Just the music wouldn't fit. And by the way, before I really start bashing this game, I just want to say, this is actually my favorite soundtrack of the entire Mega Man franchise. Mega Man 9 has some absolute bangers. And I gave it the full 3 positives for music because holy crap. If you're curious, my 2 favorite songs, because they're kind of tied, are We Are the Robots and Flash in the Dark. I love those songs. What's your favorite? As always, I love to hear from you all on that one. So, that's enough positivity, I think. Let's bash the crap out of this game, because they looked at Mega Man 2 and said, okay, so Mega Man 2 has a fairly simple structure. We've got a part of the stage where we've got some threats and stuff. Then we got the second half of the stage, which has totally different types of threats. There's a mid-mission checkpoint in the middle. There's a checkpoint at the boss. The boss has 2 attack patterns, sometimes 3, usually 2. And that's it. Okay. Now, all right. So what we're going to do is we're going to make our stages bigger because we don't have to be limited by size, right? So we can make these huge stages. And someone in the back says, are we going to add more checkpoints to that? No. Are we going to vary up the style of the puzzles or the encounters or the platforming? No. Are we going to put any kind of recovery mechanics in the game so that the player can be able to navigate it better? No. Are we getting rid of the slide because they got rid of the slide. They got rid of the slide. I know that this is a kind of a meme thing, but allow me to be very clear about this. While I can play Mega Man 2 and enjoy it just fine, and Mega Man 2 rated just fine, this feels like a game. It's not as bad as Mega Man 7, which was clearly designed for an X game and then kind of converted into 7, right? That's probably because of the incredibly short turnaround time of 3 months. I can't believe that. But anyways, right? So, okay, sure, whatever. It's not that bad. But at multiple points in the levels and multiple types of enemies, it felt like they were literally designed to be the kind of thing you're supposed to do a quick forward movement under, aka a slide or a dash, in order to avoid. And again, it's worth noting that these people had worked extensively on the ZX and Z series just before this, where you had the dash in order to be able to avoid these kind of things. That's the big one. Losing the Charge Buster is weird. Losing the slide kind of sucks. We lost the ability to toggle between weapons, L and R, which is just a weird absence. But then there's other strange changes. So I mentioned the checkpoint problem. This is, if I'm being honest, probably, I'd say, one of the 3 absolutely biggest problems of the game. The game does not know how to checkpoint properly. The reason the Mega Man 2 stages worked is because they were short and dense. You start off, you got your one screen of safety to figure out what's going on. They establish an idea, they escalate it, mid-mission checkpoint. Okay? New safe scene, new safe screen. That's where the checkpoint is. Got an idea? Escalate, new objective. And occasionally there's a third type of obstacle. Like I'm actually mentally going through Heat Man stage right now. There's a third obstacle, which is the Yoku blocks. You get past that, you're done. It's the end of the stage. That's Mega Man 2. bam, bam, bam. And that's how those low checkpoints worked. In this game, it's more like go through this really long section, go up here, and again, I'm using a specific stage in my mind, go through this type of thing, okay, don't screw up here. Lots of instant death all over the place because Inti Creates is absolutely in love with spikes for some reason. I don't know why. Dakota and I disagree on a lot of things, and we agree on a lot of things. So I guess that doesn't mean much. But one thing we absolutely agree on is for some reason they really lean on the spike button way too hard. I do not know what their obsession is with spikes. They did this in the Zeros and the ZXs as well. It's ridiculous. Anyways, so we smash through that section and we go through this thing, and then there's another. So we've gone through two separate types of obstacles, and then we have a checkpoint. And then we go through 5 separate sections of the same obstacle with no escalation and no real variety to it and no gimmicks either. It's just, here's a bunch of bottomless pits or here's a bunch of spikes. And because it's so long, the stage starts to drag a little bit. Now, it's okay having long stages. Mega Man 8 did that. But Mega Man 8 varied throughout the stages. Mega Man 8 had multiple checkpoints throughout the stages. Mega Man 8 tried to do careful terrain design to make sure that at each point you were engaged rather than simply moving through it. And there was a tempo and a pace to these previous games. 8 and 6 and 5 are probably the best examples of that kind of thing. But here it just feels like long stretches of effectively nothing. Oh, and by the way, if you die, have fun doing all that over again, and over again, and over again, and over again. The checkpoint problem is even worse than that, though. So that's a very obvious example of looking at Mega Man 2 and not understanding it. Let's look at the Wily stages. So you go to the Wily stages, and it's like, all right, you're going through the Wily stages, and you know what? I'm kind of having trouble. I've been managing so far, but I'm up to the boss refights, and I could really use going and buying some new E-tanks to be able to progress. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, cancel out. Go back to the shop, because there's a shop in this game, which is always a nice little feature. Buy a bunch of items, and then go back to the Wily stages, and guess what? You're back to Wily 1. All the way back to the beginning. All that progress gone. Which means if you want any E-tanks, or W-tanks, or lives, or any of those other bonus things to be able to carry through to the parts where you actually need it, which is Wily 4, then you'd better be able to just absolutely face grind your way through Wilys 1 through 3, and just accept the deaths as you go, and don't hit stage select, or you're so screwed. Oh, by the way, nothing tells you that. So I don't think that's good design to begin with, but the fact that there is no warning or indicator of, hey, you're going to reset your progress, is nonsense. This is NES design in a bad way. I wonder how many people in the comment section are going to say exactly that. Well, it's a NES game. That's an excuse, not a reason. Now, you could be right. They probably designed it exactly like this. I had a thought on camera. I had a thought that, I could reach out to the developers. I can't, of course, because I'm a nobody on the internet who nobody gives a damn about. But if I was actually worth a damn, I could reach out to the developers and say, why did you design it this way? I'm really curious why you didn't do proper checkpointing. I'm really curious why you didn't have a feature where you could maintain your progress through the Wily stages as you're progressing, like you can in so many of the previous games. I'm really curious why you decided to bake the 8 robot fights and the triple final boss duo into one single stage. I'm really curious why you decided to design one of the worst bosses in the worst boss in classic Mega Man in this stage. Why did you do this? Now, we've covered a lot of bad bosses in Mega Man's games. We've covered Mega Man X6 and Mega Man X7. Yep. But we haven't really had a lot of problems in the classics. The only real issue we've had was the Yellow Devil all the way back in Mega Man 1, which honestly was just not very well designed. It was very easy to fix that fight. We know this. They did that in Mega Man 3. Even the Twin Devil fight in this very game isn't that terrible. It only really makes one mistake, which is the memorization thing. That's the only flaw there. Otherwise, it's perfectly fine, right? So, okay, cool. Cool. So what the hell is going on with the Wily Machine Mark 9? We fight this thing. It's this giant dinosaur thing, which is covering make sure the camera's here, covering an absolutely huge portion of the screen. Like this overwhelming, 70% of the screen is the boss, okay? So you have very limited maneuverability. And it kind of shuffles back and forth like this, okay? Just kind of shuffling. And as it does so, it's actually on jetpacks because animating things is hard. And it shoots out this little egg, okay? All right, now the egg does decent damage. It hurts. but it's not the end of the world, so that's okay. That's okay. And it's the only nice thing I have to say about the boss. Because what you have to do is you have to shoot the egg 3 times. Once, twice, and then the third shot, as it ricochets, it has to hit the underside of the jaw of the boss to do damage. The boss has too much health in general, so you have to do this quite a few times. The boss, the eggs themselves have a pseudo RNG factor, because what happens is as the boss is moving back and forth, there's no pattern to when the egg comes out, so it oscillates, right? So for example, if it always shot out an egg at the front and always shot out an egg at the back, you would have 2 defined patterns of where the eggs would be, and you'd have a degree of control over where they are and where you are in relation to them and bouncing them back. But instead it just comes out at a timer, which means the pattern the egg takes varies and continues to vary throughout the entire fight. This also means it's entirely possible to have the egg bounce and do nothing, even if you successfully do everything right and don't get hit by it, because you have to hit the chin. This is probably the worst aspect of the fight right there. If you could bounce the egg back into the boss and it does some damage, and then if you hit it in the chin, it does more damage, like that's the weak point, that would actually have worked for me. And if that sounds familiar, that's because I've given that advice before for several of the bad bosses in this franchise, where they insist on you hitting this tiny weak point and nothing else. That would have been able to mitigate it a little bit. But instead, you have to do this perfectly. And honestly, and I mean this with sincerity, it hurts the hands after a while, because you have to jump, shoot, jump, shoot, jump, shoot, jump, shoot, jump, shoot. And you're turning left, every time it left, right, so left, jump, left, shoot, over and over and over, and it kind of gets hard on the hands. There are other methods of doing it, of course. You can try to shoot them on the ground. That didn't work out for me. You could try to use weapon power-up, which also wasn't really feasible, because I was pretty low on weapons, because remember, we just did the boss refights. But either way, that's that first fight. And that's it. There's one other thing. So if you're paying attention, if we could game over, go back, refill, walk into that with full E-tanks and a W-tank, no problem. I'm sorry. It would still be bad boss design, but we could do it. That's the Mega Man 7 approach. The gear check, right? Go gear up to fight the boss, or just be that good. Cool. That's not good, but it would work. We can't do that. Okay. So maybe make it so that you fight the first phase of the boss fight, and as soon as you do, Wily goes psh, 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 and flies off, and he goes off to the final stage where you fight his final 2 forms. This is something that Mega Man's games have done for a long time, including Mega Man 2, I feel like adding. But no, you have to fight the first phase and second phase and third phase back to back to back immediately after doing the boss refights in the same stage. Okay. Maybe if you made it so the second phase didn't have large amounts of, not quite, but leaning damage tax into it, so you could get to the third phase with relatively high health, that might be okay. Now, yes, I know there's ways to dodge, but the fight is by far the best example of when the slide should have been in the game. Because what he does is he hovers up, and he kind of tracks to you, and you want him to be on the far right side of the screen, but if you go too far right, then he's going to smash down on you because you can't move quickly because you don't have the slide. So you're like, okay. And so he lands down, and then he rushes forwards, and then he does a flame jet. Now, he homes the flame jet in on you. So there's ways to kind of control that, but doing so also kind of limits your ability to hit him. Oh, by the way, if you try to use concrete on him, which is his weakness, of course, you're probably going to run out of it because, again, we just fought the refights. So you're going to be using the pellet, which is the only thing, or any other weapon, which all does exactly 1 damage to him, which once again is the problem for Mega Man 7 with the boss health. And then we get to phase 3, which is not terrible. It's a Wily capsule. He does the usual attacks. He hits like a truck, of course, and he can teleport right in front of you. And there's nothing you can do to know that's going to happen or dodge it. He can just appear where you are and hurt you, which is definitely the definition of damage tax, by the way. Oh, and he's weak to the dumb weapon, which is long-standing tradition. He's weak to the plugs, which is the ground weapon, of course he is. And of course, if you run out of plug, or you can't hit him with plug, or he's too high for you to hit him, then you are once again having a long, slow, boring fight of slowly pecking his health down 1 bit at a time. This is so many layers of bad design stacked on top of each other, from the checkpointing, to the not being able to come back through it, to the fact that it's all in one go, to the RNG nature of the bouncing, to the fact that there's things that are difficult or actually impossible to dodge. This is just nonsense. And don't tell me it's supposed to be hard. This goes back to something I've talked about several times when it comes to these games. And in fact, I talked about this when it came to Mega Man 7. There's a difference between making something irritating, frustrating, or, enduring, as in something that takes a while to do, and making something difficult. I know some people disagree with me on this, and that's fine. I do like disagreements as long as we're being civil about it. So if anybody disagrees with me, please feel free to jump in and say, Lord, you're the dumbest, stupidest person I've ever... No, you get the point. But in my opinion, this last fight is not difficult. That's the problem. Bouncing those eggs back into its mouth doesn't really feel like something I'm doing as a skill or reward. It feels like something that I'm getting lucky on periodically because of the RNG of where the eggs show up. Being able to get through the second phase doesn't feel particularly rewarding either because it's just a slog, which I just kind of push my way through until I'm done. And I never actually beat the third boss. It has been, I think, literally years since the last review we've done where we had to put up that incomplete flag. But for this review, I did not complete Mega Man 9. And this is the last thing I want to share about this. Sometimes I feel engaged in a fight. I did go back to refight Mega Man 8, and I did beat the game without cheats. It took exactly what I thought it would. I just had to go back in, just make sure I'm refreshed, get full health, get full lives, go do the refights, go to the final fights, done, right? It was exactly what I thought. It just took me one shot. It could have taken me a lot longer. I got pretty lucky on that, I'll admit it, because there's a bit of RNG in his fight too. But I don't get into the point being, that didn't feel like a waste of my time because I was at least engaged with fights that were interesting and fun. Wasting my time is something I have no time for. I'm approaching my 40s at this point in my life, and while the age itself doesn't necessarily matter, the perspective certainly does. There's something I've gotten used to in the last about 5 years, 5 or 6 years at this point. And that's that sometimes some things are literally not worth the time. It's a basic economic equation. Is this worth the time investment on it? Because time is a currency too. And I look at Mega Man 9 and I say, I could just keep playing. I could just keep face grinding on it. Or I could, accept the loss, go out, come in with full E-tanks and full, the W tank and just push through all the Wily stages again and get to the end and then do it. I could do that. But I don't feel like that is a worthwhile usage of my time. And that is the biggest sin I could lay at any game's feet. I will never replay Mega Man 9. And I am honestly, legitimately disappointed by that. It's not the only Mega Man game I'll never replay. But I was hoping this one would be just awesome. Like, on paper, it's like, yes, a modern NES Mega Man game. Hell yes! I really hope Mega Man 10 fares better. We'll see. As always, I'm curious of your thoughts and comments. I don't have a gag today. This drained me. This really drained me. This was not a good run. So, thank you for your time and patience. I'll see you next time.